Hi. All right, welcome H Radio 323 full timers for another class pre-recorded for the 24th of September. While you are enjoying, quote unquote, enjoying Heritage Day, you should be actually watching these videos to catch up on your classes that would have happened on that day. I am, as I said, recording a couple, so about four lessons that you have to go through, and I'm going to try to keep them, well, relatively short so that they are, again, something that you can just sit back, enjoy, and obviously make some notes and see how it applies to you. Right. So what we're doing here over the next two lessons is we're going to be looking at, so 53 and 54, lessons 53, 54, is building your on a personality, right? So this document, I'm not too sure whether or not your previous lecturer covered it. It was something that we should have looked at briefly in the first month, right, of school this year. But we are going to revisit it now over two lessons and talk quite deeply about how your personality can be grown and really matured, because now you do understand how important personality is to being an on-air product, which you have been doing over the past couple of weeks in your formative three, right? And you'll continue obviously doing it till the end of September as scheduled for all broadcasts, right? Okay, and of course, once again, not that I have to say it, but you know that this also applies to your S1, your podcasting, where again, we're going to be going full throttle with that. And I'll explain more during the course of this week. Right. Okay. So we're going to look at the starting question from Tracy Johnson. We are going to be looking at a video as well, and then obviously there is not. I'm saying obviously you don't know. There are six personality traits, as you'll see here. Let me just go here. Let me just go, yeah. Personality, yeah. Six rules of personality branding, right, that we're going to look at. And then again, we'll look at the video, right? So let's just ask the question, yeah. So if you disappeared from from radio or the radio, that sounds very old school, radio forever, would anyone care besides your own mother? Listen, if your mother listens to you on radio, you're lucky. Because she's heard enough of you your entire life. So then you know you're really doing a great job. But there's a statement. It's quite broad and bold. But you know, like in other words, have you made any impact on those listeners? And would they remember you like you would remember, one of your quote unquote radio icons? In say in context of what you remember growing up, or even now that you're listening to radio in whatever kind of context, you'd pick up and say, oh, this person or that person or this show or that show, because it does leave a lasting impression. And again, for myself, I will not forget shows from Mark Gilman. Love Mark Gilman, love his style. I love that kind of chaos. I love that unpredictability, but that extreme creativeness that was super entertaining for me to listen to, particularly when I think I was about nine, I think I was, yeah, about 18 years old, right? And I'd taken a year off between, let's say, school and let's say tertiary studies. And man, my mother punished me, man. She was like, "You don't want to go to varsity? You're gonna know exactly what it means to work for your money." And then I had to run. So we had a supermarket, little supermarket, that I had to run day, nights, day. Ooh, the punishment was hard. But one thing was that I always had the radio on, So I was a big fan of 5FM when I was a kid, and so definitely my day always started with Mark Gilman, and then we got to like people like Clary Cassidy and Titch Mataz, and it's just so great, man. Like I even get like little goosebumps just talking about how amazing those particular shows and the station was for my lifestyle back then, and that's genuinely it. Like that was years ago. From that's not 20 plus years ago, and I still remember great moments in the Mark Gilman show. when I'm gonna just give you an example, but he would do pranks, right? And you obviously have to have a particular skill to be able to execute pranks properly. But he did one on Felicia Mabuse Subtle, and it was maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard on radio, ever, because Felicia has a temper on her, hey, and and he tested her, but she was so good. I also love Felicia, but anyway, what an icon as well. But he got her good. Eh? Yes, it was funny. Anyway, but that's the thing. Like, would anyone care? I did care when Mark did leave the breakfast show on five. It wasn't that my world broke down. It was just a chapter that was closed. At the end of the day, and also five. It's not about how five changed, but also I grew up and I started listening to, I started listening to quite religiously Metro FM because Pin Libiani was one of my favorite DJs of all time, and Glenn Lewis, and it was just oh man, you grow with a radio, and so again we ask a question, yeah, like if let's say you just left today, would someone remember your name? And that's fine. It's always nice to run into people or people to say, like, for example, in my own very small, because I don't want to, I'll never overemphasize, whatever it is that I did on radio. But when people say, yes, of course, I listen to Chris Jordan or Papa G or whatever it may be, and because I made a difference in their life in the sense that I just made an impact, not that I changed their life. I was there for the purpose of, guess what? Like personality and entertainment, right? So here's the six rules of personality branding. And these are things that I know comfortably now I can say, man, I do apply within, let's say, all my media practices, whether I'm doing a podcast, whether I'm doing a show, whether I'm doing, let's say, like a TV insert, whether I'm doing like digital, whatever it may be. Like these things I finally have mastered, and it's not, it by no means is something that happens overnight, right? So authenticity is big. You've heard it before. We know why it's important because we need to create that connection. We need to be able to say, like to a listener, here I am and here you are, and let's make something out of this particular moment because listen, you can trust me, be transparent and be that person that you know is the best version of yourself. There we go. You're right. It says right there. But your personality brand can be the best version of your off-air character. You must be the best version of yourself because who wants to listen to like a slightly rubbish person, And so it brings us back to the conversation that I've had with you many, many times. And I always say, listen, what type of person are you actually in real life? Are you tolerant? Like, do you have patience? Like, do you welcome different diversities, different opinions, different worldviews, whatever it may be? Like, what type of person are you in real life? Because, like, you have to you will whether you like it or not, it's gonna definitely showcase on radio sooner or later. So you can try and pretend to be a certain someone or whatever it is. It's definitely going to drain you, for the first whatever portion of your radio career when you decide to put on some kind of alter ego like a Sasha Fierce here. You know what I'm saying to you? Like it says there with Beyonce, she retired Sasha Fierce. She didn't need her anymore. She had grown as a performer, and we now just know her as Queen Bee Beyonce, right? If for you to be able to listen, your listener doesn't know what you're going through, and that's fine. I'm saying the growth spurts and I would even say mental kind of obstacles, psychological obstacles, and kind of trying to get to a point where you do love yourself, accept yourself, know that your voice matters, know that you're speaking for community when you go on air, know that you are you're basically a mild journalist as well because of the work that you do, and you are sharing information, and you are looking up, certain people that you need to interview, etc., etc. Like they don't need to know about how. you're working through that. They just want to know the end product. So faking it on air till you make it, because that's how we show believability in within ourselves. Like, oh, okay, I can actually do this. So I should believe that that is the truth of what reflects real life, So just to kind of put that into a bit of a simpler way, is let's say I go on air, right? And in my tummy and in my chest, whatever it is, like I'm super nervous, whatever it is, and I'm not quite confident on, let's say, the product or the person that I am on air. But on air, I make sure that I am confident, and make sure that I am, holistically authentic, whatever it may be, really like comfortable with myself, etc. You are showing yourself that you are and you can be a particular somebody, right? Some version of yourself, and so you'll start believing it the more and more that you do it, right? Okay, so anyway, rule two is the fit. Personalities must fit the station. Yeah, no, it's the thing is that you say, okay, but like we know how many personalities move from station to station to station. Yeah, but they don't move to every single station unless you're Fat Joe. Like Fat Joe went everywhere. Literally every single station that I can think of commercially, Fat Joe has been on, right? But having said that with Fat Joe, it just shows you how flexible that man is, because you're going to look at, let's say, the format of the station, the culture, again, kind of that vision, mission statement, etc., etc. You're going to look at the people that you are. Also, you're broadcasting aside, right? And again, of course, it's the brand matters most of the station actually, and its listeners. And do you adapt well in that, right? Okay. The big thing is, again, within the obvious kind of equal but opposing point of this is, for example, you cannot get a person, like whether they're white or whether they're not, that doesn't speak, for example, isiZulu on Ukhozi FM. It doesn't make any sense, right? And particularly maybe even to the skin color. And why I say that is because we had ankle tap, and ankle tap was like I'm not sure which language was fluid in, but he was a fit for YFM, because he could speak a certain type of vernacular, right? And so it doesn't always have to be about your skin color, your race, and your age, whatever it is, but are you the actual fit for that station and then that listener as well? So here we go. One is hiring personalities, just because they're opposite, so they have nothing in common. Little chemistry. Yes, that happens all the time when we have a multi-personality show, right? Because you know what, station managers actually don't think things through. You'd think they would, but they actually don't. So they might believe that putting two together and putting two people together, and they say work it out because you both are quote unquote professional as well as talented within your own capacity. But here we go. That's the thing. Right, okay. That doesn't always mean that you're going to gel, right? And not because one person hates another person. Maybe they do. Maybe they just don't get along personality wise, right? But also you can't just look at two people and say maybe they're a little bit the same, or maybe they are very, very different, so they might complement one another. It's not about that. You got to look at it and say, like, listen, there's chemistry over here, and there's a fit. So we also need to know whether or not, one, we fit the station, one, two, fit the audience, three, fit the format, and four, obviously fit our show. And for example, let's say any collaborators that we do the show with, our producer, our co-presenter, our contributors, etc. Right, so memorable, right? Okay, like when you are authentic. So let's just talk about someone that you meet in real life, right? And how do they make a lasting impact on you? In other words, oh, I do remember their name. I do remember what they look like. I remember their voice. I remember what that conversation was all about because guess what? I'm still thinking about it now, Maybe not all encompassing, so I'm not thinking about it all the time, but you know what that made that what that person said was this, and how I felt was this. Two very important things to make a particular experience, right, memorable, right? If it's not memorable, it's a failure, right? And you're just an announcer. So you know what? Like we look at, and this will always be the right thing. What I'm going to say now, which is not just my saying, it's the people in radio that say this are correct. It is about personality and is about content, right? So people that go on air and just back announce songs and tell me about the time and temperature, whatever, do not belong on air. And we have them everywhere, right? Because they are by no means memorable. If, let's say, someone likes that presenter and you can't see I'm doing bunny quotes, right? It's because, guess what? They played great music, which is attributed to the station, right? They had a clean show, which is attributed to format and structure, right? And there was nothing that upset them and nothing that made them super excited, right? In other words, they were apathetic, right? So they had no reaction to it, right? None of these have to do with the DJ. I'm saying taking any kind of credit for what they actually do, right? So you know what? As much as you might see it and listen to it on radio, whatever it may be, it's wrong. Like there's no point in putting someone on air if all they're going to do is back on songs and tell me about promotions and these very kind of very blatant two-dimensional interviews that are there because they paid for interviews, that type of stuff. No. Anyway, okay, you've got to be able to put some creative investment in your show. Memorable character traits don't have to be major things either. They just have to be kind of interesting. So you might be remembered by a physical characteristic. For example, maybe you might have a certain health condition, or you're skinny, or you're tall. And is there, for example, a childhood detail in your past, such as being an army brat or the son of a preacher, whatever it may be, and this filters through to the way that you are on air, right? Okay. Okay, so anyway, here we go for rule number four. Is it, are you likable? Remember I said to you, I've said to you in class, said to you, you have no choice. You have to be liked on air because the thing is that we need listeners. Listeners have to like you. Finished, right? So in this case, as I said to you, you are both the product as well as the personality, right? The person that I would say, provides the product, right? But also the product is you. So unlike again, just kind of revisit a very simple example. You go to a restaurant and you've got two things there. You've got the waiter and you've got the food, right? And so there's two things that you can literally like and dislike, right? Either the food, you might like it, but the waiter you don't like, or you might like the waiter, but the food was awful, right? Either or will contribute to whether or not you have a great experience. In radio, it's one thing. It's only you, right? It's you as that presenter and what is that you do, right? So you're that all-encompassing, likable product. So what is it that makes you nice? Can you cheer someone up with your laugh? Are you an empathetic friend that is easy to talk to and people cry on your shoulder? Do you have a spouse, kids, animals, things like that? Do you have passions that resonate with people that are within your target audience, etc., community, right? And it doesn't mean that everyone has to like you by no means, right? But the thing is that the majority of your target audience, right, should be able to say that they enjoy you, your personality, the energy you give off, etc., etc. Even villains we like, right? So we're not looking for people pleasers. We're looking for personalities that are charismatic and magnetic at the end of the day. Right. Okay. Redeeming qualities. You can be a villain. I love villains. I only love villains. I don't like the heroes. Right. Why? Because they're super interesting and they're funny and they are, again, charismatic for me. And they've got much more personality than, let's say, a dull hero. Anyway, Right, let's look at rule five. Okay, so it's difficult to be a dominant personality, right? So B3D, right? If you're one-dimensional. So some cast members, in other words, people on the show, or, people that contribute to the show, make up the show, whatever it is, can be one-dimensional additions, right? But generally, they actually have to have depth to create lifelong connections with a fan or a listener. Let's look at this little comic here, Dilbert, very old. I'm saying Dilbert is an old comic from when I was a kid. I'm not even sure Dilbert carries on, but anyway, just not important, right? Dilbert's marketing wisdom. If everyone exposed to a product likes it, the product will not succeed. The reason that a product everyone likes will fail is because no one loves it. Ooh, words of wisdom there from Dilbert, right? It's true, actually. Rather have 100 people that love you instead of 10,000 people that like you, right? And that is the rule. That is the rule for radio, right? Create one follower, one listener, one loyal listener at a time, right? So, an interesting aspect of adding layers or traits is finding contradictions in your own personality. For example, like you may be a germaphobe, right? But have no problem sharing a drink with a complete stranger. Just be sure to understand the difference between contradictions and inconsistency, right? We by no means want a personality that is one way on the one day and another way on another. Like, we don't like that type of person in real life. I've said this before, and you won't enjoy such person or personality on air. So just be who you are and stick to it. You understand? You may be a complex version of yourself in terms of like character that does have, again, as we say, layers, and there's differences to you, whatever. So many things, right? But to be an inconsistent means an unpredictable human being. People are like, no thanks, thanks, but absolutely no thanks, right? Anyway, the thing is that you can't bombard a listener. So let's say you come on air, you can't bombard them with everything about you, right? They must get to know you like they would if they were getting to know you outside the station or the show. Let's look at the last rule and look at the video. So, rule six and quirks. Right, a quirk is something, for example, like the way that you laugh, or I suppose, certain things like, for example, I always raise my one eyebrow. I don't know why. I don't know why. I can't even stop doing it. As if I'm always suspicious with people, which I actually kind of am, right? But it's a quirk of mine, right? And I by no means do it on purpose. So it's just part of who I am, right? In other words, authentic, right? But you might have a specific funny kind of laugh, you might really oh man, this I don't know. You might be very sarcastic, and can't stop rolling your eyes. I suppose is a quirk as well. It's any kind of small little thing that is very particular to you. Being a worrywart, enjoying reality TV, being like a food junkie, not a junk food junkie. Because it's bad for you. Come on now, like a flake, a scatterbrain. So remember that one particular lesson we went through a number of different personality traits, right? So here are your quirks, right? So one of the best, often the best quirks are endearing qualities that people actually like. They'll be like, okay, this person is self-deprecating, or they have like a confident, low self-esteem, right? And that's what we really like about them. Or their jokes are really funny, or once again, they've got a real big problem with dogs or cats, how scared they are, or spiders, whatever it may be. And these are quirks that make you different, right? Okay. So I'm going to stop the share here. I'm going to share this video here. Let's watch the video. I'm going to keep quiet over here.
Tracy Johnson is CEO of the Tracy Johnson Media Group. He has a long and decorated career as a broadcast executive, specializing in programming, marketing, talent coaching, and management. He's been recognized as best programmer in America by Radio Inc. magazine. and won numerous industry awards. Tracy was Vice President, General Manager, and Program Director of San Diego's top radio cluster for more than a decade. Moreover, Tracy has written 3 books about developing on-air superstars that have been described as the Bible of personality radio. Since 2007, Tracy has helped over 700 brands increase their influence through engaging audiences and building direct one-to-one relationships with existing, although it is exciting, and new listeners, viewers, readers, visitors, and customers. Please welcome Tracy Johnson. Thank you. Thank you. And also my good friend, I should say. Tracy, I really want to talk to you about talent. So much of this day is about content. Where do you see, what's the state of talent in the audio space from your perspective, and especially in the most profitable part of the audio space, the radio space?
Well, speaking specifically about radio, I think there is a lot of talent that's in radio, and I think that talent is increasingly restricted, it's frustrated, and it's searching for answers. I think that in a lot of cases, especially in the United States compared to some other countries that I'm doing work in, we've beaten talent down. They're afraid to do anything. They're afraid to step out of the box and make an impact with listeners, because every time they do, there's a car dealer or an account executive or the general manager's wife who has a complaint, and it always comes back to the talent, and the talent is tired of having to deal with any potential negatives. And I think it's really caused talent to lose its impact with the audience. We've handed that over to different media that are able to be more provocative and to go deeper and lead a passionate group of fans.
Well, what's the solution to that, though? Because I would hate to think that the answer is just continue to, diminish, and there's no room for talent in a place that has the most ears tuned to the talent. It seems unbelievable that could be true.
But it's cyclical. I mean, those of us who are old enough to have been in this business back in the 70s with gigantic air talent that were really larger than life, you get into the 80s and suddenly it became liner card radio. And I think that what we're about to see in radio here is we've got to get to a point where we don't allow Nielsen to have a stranglehold on how we operate our radio stations anymore. And the PPMing of the formats that we create, PPM says that every time the mic goes on, listeners tune out. We do research projects with companies like Mark's, and we ask people if they want more talk or less talk on the radio. Well, what do you think they're going to say?
Wait, I didn't write that question. I didn't write that question.
And so we interpret that as broadcasters and programmers is, let's tell the DJs to shut up, because every time they talk, we're inflicting damage upon ourselves. We don't ask the question, do you want more entertainment or less entertainment? The question shouldn't be how much we're talking, but how well we're provoking a passionate response from our listeners. And I think we've got to come back to that point, because if we continue to program to Nielsen sample size, and whoever happens to take that phone call and carry that meter with them, if we continue to program to that, we will take all of the fun, all of the reason to tune into radio completely out of our offerings.
Isn't it also true that under that scenario, that playing that game down the road puts you in the same category as anyone else who plays that reach game? Thus, if you have something big, unique, memorable, compelling along the lines of what I just presented, it can't surface to the same degree because we're playing a different game.
Absolutely. And I was listening to a station yesterday online that had a great break at 7:05, and they went for about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden there's this timer that either the program director, the VP of programming, or someone who's watching what Nielsen does, this timer goes off in their head, and they stop talking before they ever got to the impact point. So they wasted 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It was chatter. There is no payoff for the listener. There's nothing for them to get involved with. That was clutter. If they had taken that and invested a little bit more time, a little bit more passion, a little bit more into making an impact, they could have had something that was a did you hear moment. Jeff and Jerry used to call them did you hear moments on my station. When someone gets to work today, when they're having lunch with their friends, What did you hear on that radio station? How did you become part of that conversation? They were this close to it, and they stopped before they got there. And I hear that at station after station after station, because we're not willing to invest short-term pain, talking too much for those meters, in exchange for long-term attention and that gain, and really making an impact with the audience.
When do you think the radio space specifically will awaken to the talent that exists in the world of podcasting?
When they have enough pain and there's enough hurt, and advertisers start not paying attention to that quarter-hour report that the account executives bring in, and they demand response rather than just buying numbers. And I think that's increasing more and more and more. And I think that's when we're going to see a significant snapback. But there's a tremendous amount of talent there in podcasters. And what's the difference? Well, it's usually focused. It's leading a specific community of targeted listeners who are passionate around the topic that they're talking about, or the personality that's presenting it. And they are willing to invest themselves in making that impact and getting deep with that audience. And but at the same time, when most broadcasters are looking for a new personality, a new morning show, they're looking for people who know how to manipulate PPM. And those are two completely separate things. We want somebody who's willing to tweet. They think broadcasters think podcasting is taking today's show and putting it online.
Right. There's this notion, I think, that the thinking of Pandora as music service myth, that's all they and others will ever be. As I showed, iTunes Radio already is not that. Slacker's in the room, Slacker's not that. They're mixing in spoken word and other kinds of premium content that they can own in some cases. When do you see that becoming more common? When do you see, because it seems to me it's only a matter of time, that with talent being scarce, it's going to gravitate to the people who value it most. And that eventually the iTunes Radios, the Pandoras of the world are going to embrace that kind of thing. No?
Well, that's happening on iHeart too. iHeart's putting a lot of spoken word on iHeartRadio. And I think it comes down to what you had mentioned in your open, Mark, of this is just different distribution forms for entertainment sources. Different ways that personalities can become stars and can connect with people through that common interest. And whether it's Pandora or iTunes or wherever that source is coming from, it's coming, and it's happening in a variety of ways. And I think radio stations in particular have to adapt their model and use the advantages that we have, which is that tremendous reach, with 90% plus of the audience tuning in every single week. That's a tremendous opportunity. And we have the ability in radio to motivate those people that are tuning in if we give them something to respond to. And increasingly, we're giving them nothing to respond to.
What advice do you give to the manager who comes to you and says, Tracy, this is all great, but I got to look at my PPM numbers on a daily basis. I can't afford to open up the mic. I can't afford to have people take a risk. I can't afford, literally, to hire a particular... What do you say to those people?
Well, that's a very common conversation. It's not hard to find people who agree with the concept and the philosophy, but the reality is that they're dealing with budgets, they're dealing with expectations, they're dealing with the advertising and buying community who is interested, has a 25-year-old media buyer who just wants to see what value-added promotion you're going to put on to this buy to justify the rate. We're locked into an existing model that is not going to last forever. And so how do you evolve, and how do you transform and all that? It's not hard to get someone to agree with the concept, but executing that and having the vision to respond to that and to move into the future is a whole different conversation, and one that's not very successful. I want to find a station somewhere in a large enough market with a signal that is, and maybe it doesn't even, that reaches most of the market, not necessarily all of the market, doesn't have much debt, and is willing to try something different. Because imagine if you put a essentially commercial-free station on that played a lot of music and had that very well curated by personalities who can drive digital and social engagement. Think of the demand that you would create. if you were to remove most of the reasons that people tune out, which are the interruptions and the disruptions, and be able to drive a database, to drive people to social engagement, to videos online, to identify what their preferences are, what their behaviors are, and then connect them with things that they're already interested in, rather than trying to sell them something that they're not. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for that, and if somebody would step out and do that, I think they could be the #1 cuming station in the market very quickly. It would be a highly interactive product. I think it could be profitable very quickly, and it could create a new model that may transform how a lot of broadcasters are approaching things.
And again, some may look at that and say, well, that's pie in the sky, but the reality is the competition doesn't wait, right? I mean, the world is changing regardless of whether we like it or not. Someone's got to step out and say, we're going to create the following innovations because we have no choice in the long run, right?
Well, and there will be a disruption at some point where a broadcaster has nothing to lose or not as much investment to be concerned about or to protect, and is able to try something like that. And when that happens, then their radio over-the-air competitors have a real problem on their hands. And the other point is I think that we broadcasters have to stop thinking of just other stations as being our competition. One of the first conversations I have when I go into a station for the first time is they want to know how we're going to beat station X or station Y or station Z. How are we going to take share from them? And my point is we don't need to take share from any other radio station. We need to attract more attention, create more engagement, and interact more with the people who are already listening to us. Because there's plenty of cume to go around. If you look at the numbers, everybody's got enough listeners. If we can do more with them and attract, and we're competing with all other technologies.
One more question, and then we'll see if there's a question in the audience. But let me flip the previous one around. Instead of, what advice would you give to managers? What advice would you give to the talent, the people that are out there in the trenches, the people that are frustrated, as you indicated, with the circumstances they work in right now? What's your advice to them?
Develop your own audiences. Develop your own brand, develop your own connections with fans who are following you for very specific reasons, and lead them in different ways in different areas. I'm working with a morning show in a medium-sized market right now who's doing just that, with the idea that in 3 years they'll become their own media and may or may not have their show broadcast over the radio. But they would have some options that way if they choose to. A lot of times I'm talking to talent and they say, yeah, but we just don't have enough time in the day. We don't have enough support. We don't have a producer. We don't have an intern. Look, it's your career. Invest in your career, invest in your own brand, become your own media, and be willing to make the commitment to take your future into your own hands. Because we don't know what the future is going to hold for our traditional radio jobs 5 years, 10 years from now.
Yeah, even 5 years. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes. Okay, hold on.
When it comes to distinctive radio stations and experiments, are you familiar with Rock 102.1 in LA when they had Jonesy's Jukebox, one of the guys from the Sex Pistols, and they had all these stars that were the DJs, and it was very, very out of the box. Absolutely my favorite thing I've ever listened to, and it went away. It didn't survive. Any insight on that?
Well, I think what happens is you've got a smaller audience that doesn't perform well in a traditional radio model. And I think that one of the crossroads that we have to face in radio is, do we want a small but loyal, passionate, excited, dedicated fan base, or do we want to play that big cume game? And I think that the situation that you had mentioned wasn't able to compete in a traditional radio model world. But there are other ways of monetizing that. We just don't have the infrastructure in radio to sell it that way.
The other thing I would add too is that not every experiment is going to work. That's why they're called experiments. I mean, look at the hit rate with movies and television shows. How many times did Harry Potter get turned down by publishers? I mean, it's just incredible until finally.
Well, and I think that that's another area where talent is repressed right now. They are so afraid to try anything for fear that it might fail, and they're going to be held responsible for that. And program directors are in the same situation. We can't try anything different. We have to have that research or that consultant to fall back on, because I'm not falling on the sword for this and losing my job over something if the shares go down in the next quarter.
Is there any solution to that other than you still have to try, you still have to risk things?
You've got to. If I were a programmer today, I would find a company that was willing to innovate, that had a vision and wasn't afraid to fail. I think you have to be smart in doing experiments, and if you do fail, you have to identify that very quickly and move on and try something else. But I think a lot of cases in radio, we've stopped trying, we've stopped innovating, and we're falling back on what's safe.
Any final question from the audience? Yes, sir.
So if I'm a young, energetic, entertaining, outgoing, young talent full of ideas, and I want to entertain the world, and I hear radio as it is today, why in God's name would I pursue a career in radio? So where's the farm club? Where are we growing tomorrow's talent? I mean, nobody says, hey, I'm going to go to broadcast school. They say, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. Where's radio going to get these people?
That's a great point, because if you talk to kids in college, and you go to even the broadcasting classes, and you ask them what they want to do, very few of them say, I want to be on the air. They want to be in a creative outlet, and I think that the best thing that radio stations can do is find creative people and put them on the air and let them fail. Let them fail overnights. Let them develop their skills and try something completely different. What's it going to hurt you between 1 and 5 o'clock in the morning on Saturday night, Sunday morning, or Sunday night, Monday morning?
They will not say no to radio. That's one thing. Somebody said to me, well, Adam Carolla, he said he'll never do radio again. And I say, baloney. What Adam Carolla will never do again is get up at 4 in the morning, 5 days a week for 4 hours a day. That's what he'll never do again. But you say, Adam, you're already doing this podcast. How would you like it to be broadcast on the air? He'll say, where do I sign? Tracy Johnson, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, good. So I'm going to stop over there. So I'm going to stop that share over there, and we'll end the lesson there.